Okay, this is just a short addendum to 3b Mark, where I was trying to show how Mark slows down and tracks to Matthew, and that was pretty obvious. But what I hadn't shown was how he tracks to Luke. And basically he starts tracking Luke to tell you what themes of Luke he's going to track in Mark 1:22. And if you look at the middle of the screen, big block of blue text, that's Mark. And then on the right is Luke. And I've highlighted the parallel passage in Luke that Mark is quoting. It's not 100% verbatim quote, but what he does is he takes key parts of what Luke said and he literally reproduces the words. Okay, and then he adds stuff around it. So what you see highlighted in blue in the big blocks is a sample of how Mark tracks to Luke. Okay, so and you know, it would take me a lot longer to show this, but basically what he's doing is Mark will track swatches of Matthew, and then when it comes to the demon passages, especially the demon passages, he's going to track to Luke. Now, why he does it that way, I haven't figured out. I only know that he's doing it. Okay? But the point of this video series about Mark is to show that Mark is avowedly the third gospel, not the first. And that he himself is telling you that by the way he does his quotes. Because this, I'm going to back it up now. Okay, this is still the first chapter of Mark. See, Mark 1:1. And he's tracking all throughout here. He's tracking Matthew. Okay, he's going through to Matthew all the way through here. And I showed you that in Mark 3b, and that's up here in Matthew. Okay, and how he changed the wording about Zebedee to make a point about the father consenting and about the fact that the father wasn't left in the lurch. Okay. But the question really became then, okay, it's real obvious he's quoting Matthew, but how do we know when he's quoting Luke? And to know that, you first have to keep going. He still keeps on going here. But when he gets to the Capernaum verse, okay, it's not until he gets to Capernaum, excuse my bad pronunciation, okay, which only Luke covers. See, that he makes it easy. All right, see, it's not until he comes to the Capernaum passage that, which is really right here in Luke, right? Because he went to Capernaum twice. That was the wine thing with the wedding. Matthew, this is Matthew, okay? And this was starting, Matthew 4 with the temptations. Afterwards, Christ passes the temptations and starts to appoint his own disciples. Matthew doesn't cover the Capernaum incident. Luke does. See, because Luke is always wrapping around Matthew. Luke had ended Luke 4, and there's a reason for that I've not yet covered. Luke reverses the temptations here. Okay? He reverses it. And I'll have to finish that later. It's a rhetorical style that Luke is following because basically the devil's still going to tempt him again. So he reverses the order of the temptations to sort of introduce that topic. But the point is that this is where Jesus announces his ministry, and Mark skips over that. And instead, he goes straight to Capernaum with the incident about the demon. See? And that's going to be a major theme in Mark. Whereas Matthew skipped over the whole thing. You see? So it's interactive. It's going back and forth. Sometimes Mark is tracking on Matthew, which is at the very far left. and sometimes Mark is tracking on Luke, which is in the far right. So we incompetently listed Mark second, Mark is third. Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John is how we all learned it in Sunday school. But it's Matthew, Luke, Mark, and John, according to the Bible's own depiction. Because Luke, as we've seen and will keep on seeing in the Synoptic series, is wrapping around Matthew, and then Mark selectively wraps around Luke. And again, some of these are direct quotes, like there, okay, in there. Those are direct quotes of Luke. Okay, and then he adds stuff. He added that. Okay, and then this is a segue. Okay, this is exact quote. Okay, this is exact quote. Okay, this is exact quote. You see? And in some cases it's really interesting because even though it's an exact quote, the Greek language must have changed a great deal after Luke wrote his gospel, because some of the words are different. They have the same meaning, you can tell it's an exact quote, but the style of explaining it isn't quite the same. There are little, really minuscule differences, but there are differences. Okay? So, if I had time, I would study, well, gee, this is how Greek language changed. Because Mark is writing in about 68 AD. Luke probably, it's really still hard for me to figure it out. In one of my other videos, I say that Luke probably came out, Luke and Acts were at least published. He might have written it earlier, but they were published at the same time as a unit. Okay, that's one of the issues that I'm still trying to work with. It looks like both Luke and Ephesians and Acts were all written and at different times, but were published as a unit when Paul got out of, or when Paul was sent to Rome. Ephesians looks like it was written earlier than it was published, and I'm still working on that. But the point here is that it's real obvious from this text, and you'll see this happen time and time again, that Mark is quoting Luke. So it's obvious that Luke is second and Mark is third. So I'm going to stop this here just so that you saw a sample of the style.